painting for more than 20 years, New Jersey-based artist Javier Soto is known for his world-class stylized automotive mural work, portraiture, photorealism, and versatility. The work is especially clean and detailed, and he can adapt to any style, from biomechanical and fantasy to pinups, graphics, and more. Soto's artwork is dynamic, and his use of color is unique and brilliant. Airbrush Action magazine ranks Javier Soto among the top 10 automotive painters in the world, and the following presentation will prove why.
Hi, I'm Javier Sото. I've been airbrushing for 20 years, been custom painting for 10. I'm going to show you how I paint a killer clown. Let's get started. I've selected my drawing. This is an original drawing I have here. At this point, I needed to transfer the image onto the board. So what I did was I made a Xerox copy and I blew it up. Here you can see what we've done with the drawing. We got a cutout here. I used an X-Acto blade and you can see how it comes off. We're going to use this as a stencil, and you can see I anchored this stuff here, and this kind of holds the paper in place. I have a cool and easy method for taping the stencil down to the board. I've taken the paper and I've cut holes into it, and I've taken some simple masking tape and pressed it down, holds onto the board right through the hole, and it holds it in place, as you can see. And I've done that throughout, and I've put them in points where the stencil is more likely to pull off, and that helps holding it down some, but not too much, where I get a slightly soft underspray in there that causes a nice soft edge. Later on, we're going to use this positive for our transfer method because it has all the drawing and all the lines that I'm going to need inside, and I'll have a white base at that point where the transferred lines will show on.
Javier pours a mixture of white base coat reducer using a ratio of approximately 1:1 into the color cup of the Iwata Revolution airbrush and stirs the paint. Javier then airbrushes the open area or negative of the stencil. To avoid underspray, which is when the paint creeps under the edges, Soto directs the spray above and away from the inside contours of the shape. Some paint will find its way under the stencil, but only to a minimum. Notice that Soto wears a glove to protect his skin from the chemicals inherent in urethane paints. Also, we cannot stress enough the importance of using proper ventilation and wearing, at the very least, a dual cartridge respirator mask at all times during spraying.
And if you're wondering why I didn't cut out the hair, it's because the hair is going to be like real fire, and with real fire I want softer edges. So those I'll do freehand and I'll add them. They'll be a little more translucent, they won't be so white. Also, I'm not going to spray a whole lot of white. I'm basically going to get a foundation so that you guys can see the transfer method. If I tried to do the transfer method directly on the black, you wouldn't see it because the graphite paper is black itself. So it's going to be like a gray color, and that's just enough so that you can see the black. Some edges like this, I don't worry about them too much. I could sharpen those later on. This stencil is basically just to get most of the overspray off of it, so that you don't have to do a whole lot of cleaning. I'll probably have to do some cleaning afterwards anyway, but it's definitely going to be a lot less with the stencil on. I'm using a base coat white, thinned out about 1:1, and I use that as a base, and for coverage this is good enough right now, but for detail colors I might alter the mix a little bit. It's not that big of a deal at this point, but if you get out of hand with the blotchiness, sometimes it'll be hard to hide it. I go a little heavier in the centers now.
Javier typically runs his airbrush at about 25 to 30 psi, or pounds per square inch of pressure, generated by the air compressor. In the next step, Javier prepares to transfer the design onto the surface. First, he aligns the positive, or cutout piece of the stencil, to the negative part and draws registration lines with a pencil.
This is Ceral paper, also known as graphite paper. Basically, it's for transferring designs onto surfaces, and it's used basically the same way you use carbon paper. It has two sides to it. I want to show you the difference. You can see one side is a little wider and the other side is darker. This is the side that has the coating on it that transfers. So always make a note of that and make sure you get the right side. That's the side that you want down, so you want to flip it over, and then what we want to do is tuck it underneath. Try to keep this pretty registered there.
Because the registration lines are covered by the graphite paper, Javier will expose them by cutting the transfer paper. To know where to cut, he first traces a guideline along the bottom edge of the stencil shape. The line is then cut with a sharp razor knife or scissors. The line doesn't have to be followed exactly, so don't worry about precision here.
Okay, I've cut the graphite paper, so now it'll expose the lines and you'll see how they line up. At this point it's pretty registered. It has a line here, and then the anchor tape up on top.
Javier then traces every line in the drawing, pressing the pencil point firmly against the surface to ensure that the image transfers clearly. Soto's image is printed about 50% lighter to make sure the pencil or pen lines are distinguishable from the copy. Otherwise, you may lose track of your lines and will have to retrace repeatedly. If your drawing requires any changes, you can alter it during this phase. Javier pauses to confirm the quality of his line transfer. Is it dark enough, or did it convey it all? The transfer is good, so he'll continue. The cutout and transfer paper are removed, and the line drawing is revealed.
Okay, I poured some white in the cup, and now I'm ready to start laying down some white. The white is going to serve two purposes. It's going to knock down those trace lines that we put down, and it's also going to start building up some form with light. Okay, I like starting from the center out. I'm going to start building up my light source, and at the same time I'm going over the lines. At this point it's also a good time to start laying down some basic texture. As you notice, I'm making the brow with some bumps in it, and I'm also starting to build up these little circular bumps here. Start working on the other brow. Same thing over here.
During this phase, you can add more texture, detail, and address symmetry issues if necessary. Notice that the protruding areas such as the brows, nose, and cheeks receive more white for added dimension. When doing teeth, I like to treat each tooth as an individual object. Each one gets its own light source. And if you notice, I'm putting the light a little heavier in the center and in the top because it'll be catching more light. As we start painting the teeth in the back, the highlights start switching a little bit more toward the center of the mouth. And these highlights in the back are pretty much right on the edges of the teeth, and every tooth that's closer forward gets a brighter highlight. That's how I create the illusion of roundness in the mouth.
And now I'll highlight the gums.
For small detailing or sharper lines, you need to position your airbrush as close to the surface as possible without contacting the airbrush needle with the surface. Javier then retreats the airbrush approximately 4 to 6 inches from the surface to achieve a broader spray pattern and a more gradual, natural-looking shading. At the same time, Javier is always mindful of the direction of the light source and paints accordingly. Javier then resprays the entire area to further lighten the image and to mute any remaining pencil lines. In this step, any contrast lost is later regained with a darker color.
I really want this nose to catch a lot of light, and also in the brows and the forehead. Let's work on the hands now. I'm using an Iwata Revolution HPCR with a 0.5mm needle. I like this gun because it gives me a good range of line thickness, shoots out viscous paint pretty well, and it's awesome for urethanes. It's especially perfect for the step where I'm laying down a lot of white. Okay, now we have enough white and we're ready for some more colors.
For the shadow color, a bluish gray, Javier mixes approximately 4 parts black, 4 parts white, 2 parts blue, and 1 part purple.
I like to test my paint off to the side before I commit to the actual painting. I think I need to add some retarder because it slows down the drying and you get less tip dry. Just a couple of drops. That looks pretty good. Funny thing happened while we were off camera. While I was stirring the paint, I was shaking the airbrush, and what happens is sometimes when I close the vent hole, pressure builds up, and all of a sudden we had a little pop, and some paint splattered on the painting. But I'm glad that happened. We want to show you custom painting with warts and all, so that gives us a good opportunity to show you how we go ahead and repair something like that. Alright, here's the splatter. When something like this happens, first thing you want to do is you just want to blot the wet spots. What happened was we had 5 drops that landed on here, and first thing I did was grab a paper towel and blot them, and then you want to make sure you don't feel any texture on them. Now normally what you would do is you'd want to go in there with white and cover that up, but what I want to do is if you start with white, what happens is you start building up the white that's around it, and that gets brighter, and then this spot still shows. So what you want to do is you want to knock everything down back a little darker. We're going to do it with that same color that I mixed. It was going to be the shadow color, which is pretty close to black anyway. And then I'm going to come back in with some white and try to make it less visible. You could go ahead and start outlining some of the stuff already. And you want to blend that out. Maybe bring it into like a groove in the skin or something. I'll go ahead and bring this into a shadow area over here. This one is kind of where a highlight should go, so that one I want to blend it out more evenly. Same thing on this one. With these I'll probably just go ahead and do a larger area. Okay, I know that looks really bad right now, but I'll show you how that'll come back together. Okay, I went back to my white, make sure I give it a little stir. Test it, and we're ready to start. That looks pretty good. See how the blemishes are magically disappearing? And now if you still see some of the blue, that's fine because that's the shadow color I'll be coming in with next. That will help blend it even further. I think we're good. That didn't take too long.
Now that the foundation is established in white, Javier will further define the lines, shapes, and darker tones of the image with the shadow color. With each step, Killer Clown comes closer to life. Javier likens this step to a sort of carving out of the shapes.
I'm going to start building up some texture. I want the brows protruding more and giving a greater impression of the eyes receding. That's all done with shading. Let's enhance the textures here also. Now I'll start with the other brow.
The key is to build slowly during this step, intensifying sections as needed. It's much easier to build color than to subtract it. Resist the temptation of going too dark. A way to avoid this is to use either intercoat clear or straight reducer to cut your colors to a weaker concentration, or to lighten your color to a targeted value. An effective method is to add white as necessary. Choose only one method or the other, not both.
As I'm getting closer to the outer edges here, I'm starting to hear a lot of that whistle. And it's a little reminder that I can go ahead and take this stencil off now. I only needed it when I was spraying the white. I wanted to control the overspray. But at this point I'm doing a lot of the dark colors now and a lot of shading, so I really don't need the stencil anymore. I'm going to go ahead and take it off now. Just going to finish this ear off.
Javier continues applying his shadow color. Another goal for Javier in this step is to build crisper lines and smoother transitions in the shading, unlike the previous step where he was more loose with his white coverage and rendering.
This is a mixture of blue, black, white, and purple. It's a little bit closer to the blue side. Those are the colors that I usually use when I want to make a good shadow color for white. I like over-reducing my mixtures, especially when I'm doing really detailed stuff like this. I like to build up my color slowly. I make it a real weak color. If this color was thicker, or if it was mixed, let's say at a ratio of like just 1:1, it probably would have covered a little too quick and it would have seemed a lot darker. So this is probably, I'd say, about 3:1. Okay, when doing teeth, I don't like to outline the teeth completely. I kind of do, I'll show you what I do right here. I kind of connect over here and then I do a little dagger stroke and fade it halfway in between, just enough to indicate the separation between the teeth. And then right here in the corners, I like to put a little gap in there, especially on a killer clown. Later on, I'll probably take this color and give it some really like warm colors, like make the teeth look yellow and a little bit of brown in there. We really want to make him real evil and make him look like he's got some bad hygiene also.
Javier is careful not to place too much shadow on the teeth, saving room for the other warmer colors later, namely browns and yellows. The blue in the shadow color will overpower subsequent colors if too much is applied.
I think I'm pretty happy with the blue right now. We're ready for the next step. And now for the fun part, we're going to lay down some color, and I'm going to start with red.
Soto starts by outlining and then filling in the gum area with a very thinned, opaque red. Later, Javier will use a transparent deep red to render shadows over the opaque red gums.
And I'm still going to go ahead and shade all this to give the gums some form here. I want to make it look like the gums are bumpy and also shiny. Later on, we're going to go ahead and make them look wet also with some white highlights.
Javier allows some of the white base to show through by not covering it completely. This achieves a more three-dimensional effect.
Now we're going to go down to the lower gums. I like outlining first. And then I'll shadow. Now I'm going to fill in the inside of the mouth with red. Later on, this is going to be really dark. Now I'm going to start fading in from the outline. Towards the back of the mouth, I could go ahead and fade some pink into the teeth also, being that it's going to be a lot of shadow colors back there anyway. If I keep going on with this red over the shadow color, I'll totally kill my shadow, and I still want to keep it there just so that I can see it later on when I go ahead with the dark colors and do further shadowing.
Notice that Javier does not perform long, continuous lines, but rather several shorter strokes that combine to create the illusion of one continuous line. Javier believes that this is the best method for achieving a more accurate line.
Notice how I'm keeping the highlights in there. I like using as much of the white foundation as possible and later on intensifying the whites during the highlighting phase. And then I like putting some textures in there also. I think that's pretty much it for the red. And now for my next color, we're going to start with some purple. I like my purple a little bit on the magenta side. What I did was I took straight purple and added some magenta to it. And then I reduced it pretty thin, about 2 to 1. Usually I go about double what the recommended mixture is, for airbrushing purposes, that is. Also, you can see that that blue that I laid down in the beginning, that shadow color, is coming through as a shadow color for this color. It works out very well. I don't have to worry too much about overspray here, being that the toner is pretty transparent, so it doesn't show up in the black background. Just got to be careful working around the lips here. I want to keep the overspray away from the lips. Even if I get a little bit on there, it's not too big of a deal because the colors are pretty close in hue. And I might even use this color as a shadow color for some of the lips and inside the mouth. I want to do the best I can to keep the overspray away from the hand. Sometimes it just means working a little slower there, staying close and not laying too much color.
For the illusion of dimension, Javier follows the bumps on the skin, making sure the muscles in the brows and the forehead show through the makeup.
For the hat, all I'm going to do right now is render the band in purple.
To achieve a satin look, Javier paints the ribbon of the hat as if it were a reflective cylindrical shape by creating contrasting shading.
The purple is also a good shadow color for the red. I'm adding some veining here with the purple.
Javier uses the same purple to shade and enhance most of the reds, including the nose, mouth, and gums.
I apply the purple shading a little heavier in the corners of the mouth. In between the lip and the gum is a good place for it also. Also some shadow color in the bottom of the lip.
And also dusted the purple onto the back of the teeth, adding a tint to the jaw and the chin.
That pretty much completes the purple.
The rest of the hat is airbrushed with green and rendered as a cylindrical object to match the hat's ribbon. To achieve a warmer, more lime green, Soto added transparent yellow to phthalo green.
This color is also transparent, so overspray is not a big issue. Also, this mixture has mixed 2-to-1 with reducer. I like my paint pretty thin. I'd rather build up my layers slowly and more gradually. Sometimes it takes a few coats, but I like that better than mixing it too heavy and possibly going too dark. Remember, it's always easier to darken than it is to lighten, so consider that when mixing your colors. After this, I think I'm going to give him some green eyes. And now for our next color, we're going to go with some yellow. Painting the teeth yellow gives the face a wider look. And also this yellow is going to give me a good foundation for building highlights, making the teeth look wet. I like airbrushing the yellow a little heavier in between the teeth and right in the corners where the teeth meet the gums. Also, I'm going to use this color on the white of the eyes. Not a whole lot needed here. Let's spray some yellow on the nose to knock that white down, and then I'm going to jump up to the hat after this. Right over that light area. That completes this section. With the yellow still in my cup, I'm going to go ahead and add some red oxide to that, and I'm going to make almost like a burnt orange. I'll stir that around some. Sometimes back flushing just a hair to get any yellow that's still inside the nozzle back. You got to do this very carefully. Now I'm going to take my reducer, I'm going to thin this up some. I will place the lid on. Give it a little shake, and we're ready to spray. This is a pretty strong mixer, so you want to build it up carefully and slowly. I'll start in the back of the teeth because it's a little bit more forgiving there if I slip. Basically, I want to get right up in the corners of the teeth, and I'm going to add brown over the original shadows. I refer to it as brown, but it's more like a burnt orange or a red oxide. I'm going to go to the eyes. On the eyes, I just want to hit the very corners here. And bring a little bit into the green. Alright, now we're going to move down to the hands. I want to give his hands a grimy, weathered look here. So I'm going to go ahead and dirty up his hands some. I'm going to go into the fingernails. Now later on I'm going to add some black to this. And these colors are going to mix and do some interesting things. And this finishes off the brown. My next color is a detail black. It's basically the same as a normal black, except it has a little bit more reducer in there, sometimes a drop or two of retarder to help flow and prevent tip dry. And also I'm using the Iwata Custom Micron CMB. I think that combination of the detail black and this gun is excellent for doing detail. I'm looking for the extreme dark areas here, like this corner here in the mouth. Do a little outlining on the teeth and then back it off and shade the whole group of teeth together a little further. See how that's pushing that corner in the mouth way back, giving it some depth. Also behind the teeth you want to put some shadows back there, give it a nice layered look, separating the red in the background of the mouth and the teeth. Put a little darker shadow between the lip and the gums. And then right here where the corners of the two teeth and the gum meet, put a little darker spot in there. Basically a little dagger. I start right in the corner, do a dagger going down, and I'll fade the teeth gradually going back. Also underneath the nose, want the shadow a little more pronounced, and this one also. Barely pulling back, building it up real slowly. Here I start with a soft outline, and then I'll fade into the red also. Some areas, such as the back of the mouth, can be almost completely black. They won't catch much light. I'll put some softer shadows a little further back. That'll also help dirty the teeth up a little bit. Then I'll continue the cheek shadow into the red, and I'll also bring it into the white some more. Now to the lower teeth. I'll add a little bit to the edges of the lips here. I'm going to add a shadow where the lip meets the chin. There's already a shadow there with the bluish black mixture I used in the beginning, so I'm going to go over that area just to deepen it up a bit. Always a little heavier where the shadow colors are. Now I'm going to paint some of the folds of the collar and also add some tears in there. You don't want to cover up the purple completely, you just want to deepen it up in various places, particularly the inside rolls of the collar. It's also a good time to start covering up some of the overspray.
Javier begins covering up the overspray on the background with black. An outline is established first, with the black then being faded out from that edge. Be careful not to allow any black overspray to drift onto Killer Clown. One preventative method is to angle the airbrush away from the image. The stencil used in the beginning of this presentation dramatically reduced the amount of cleaning with black. Black, reduced approximately 200%, is used for the dark tones and shadows of the image. The ears, deepest corners of the mouth, underneath the nose, the ruffles, whatever requires a shadow. Javier uses a wax and grease remover to wipe the surface and to check his progress. The gloss produced from the wax and grease remover accurately mimics how the artwork will appear after clear coating and will also reveal any flaws in the painting, such as undetected overspray, smudges, and scratches. For the fire hair, a mixture of opaque yellow, orange, and reducer are prepared.
For the hair, I'm going to go with a true fire look. I'm going to go ahead and lay out some opaque colors, and then after that I'm going to come in with some candies and enhance those colors. And I'm going to do it in several layers. This way I get a nice layered effect. And I think I'm pretty happy with that.
Next, Javier concocts a mixture of candy red, made from House of Color apple red candy concentrate, and intercoat clear. Generally, to avoid color bleeding, it is not recommended to add more than 20% candy concentrate to intercoat clear. An equal part of reducer is added. Javier sprays a heavier coverage on the outer edges of the hair to intensify the glow of the fire. Javier adds more opaque yellow to the orange-yellow mix from the previous step to create a lighter, more yellowish color to be used as the base for the next layer. The illusion of fire is more effectively achieved with the use of multiple layers. Notice the transparency of the flames and how this layer beautifully contrasts with previous layers. Flames are spontaneous and unpredictable, and that must come across in your paintings. Starting with an intercoat clear, Javier adds approximately 20% tangerine orange candy, thinned with equal parts reducer. Javier covers the second layer of fire with the orange candy, again spraying heavier along the outer edges. Again, a mild wax and grease remover is used to check the painting's progress for any problem areas. So far, Soto is extremely pleased.
We finished the fire. Now what we want to do is we want to create the illusion of illumination. Before we do that, we want to create the colors to be just right for that. You want to work on darker colors. If you start working on lighter colors, that illumination won't show up. So I got some dark color here I just mixed up, and I'm about to spray that now.
For this color, Javier blended a blue-black mix with 2 parts phthalo blue, 2 parts purple, 4 parts black, 1 part white, and roughly 12 parts reducer. Remember, these measurements are approximate, so experiment accordingly.
Now we're going to lay down the illumination color. This is the color that's radiating off of the fire. Also, this is the same color that we used earlier when we were laying down that fire. This is the opaque color that we were using. It was an orange-yellow mix that I had made. Alrighty, I'm pretty happy with that. I think we're ready for the next step. Sometimes you get a color shift when laying an opaque color over another color, and we're going to try to defeat that. I'll show you where it's happening. This is the area where we're having that problem. Notice that it's turning a little green. Well, we're going to go ahead and put its complementary color, which is red, and we're going to try to shift that back to neutralize it. I don't want to cover up the yellow completely, but I want to get it right where it starts turning green. Besides being its complementary color, it's also a color that's in the fire itself, so it would make sense that it would radiate some red also. The further away areas, like up in here, I can even put it heavier with the red. Now for the final part, and my favorite part, we're going to start laying down some white highlights. I've poured some white in the cup and I've reduced it just right.
White highlights really bring a painting to life. Whatever you wish to make shiny or reflective should have sharper, crisper highlights, the gums, lips, teeth, and eyes. Non-reflective or duller highlights are reserved for areas such as the skin, nose, and the satin finish of the ruffled collar. Each component of a painting should have its own highlights. After this step, Killer Clown is ready for clear coating. If you would like to see more of Javier Soto's work, please visit his website at www.javiersoto.com.
I'm real happy the way this piece turned out. I hope you enjoyed watching this presentation as much as I enjoyed sharing my techniques with you. Thank you for watching.